Hello!
Hey!
This week's video is all about our top 10 reasons for not living on a narrowboat.
This will be followed up, incidentally, by 10 reasons why you should live in a narrowboat. So we're not being completely negative, we just want to give people a balanced idea of what it's like to live on a narrowboat.
Yes. So it's not all sunshine, roses and castles, is it, living on a narrowboat?
No, absolutely not, and we've never pretended that, to be honest. We've always tried to show the good and the bad of living aboard as continuous cruisers.
Yeah. So in no particular order, we're going to talk about toilets. The thing about living on a narrowboat, you can't just flush your toilet and have it going out into the canal. It's just not on. But there are a few options. You can have a pump out, but that costs about £20 every time you pump out your toilet, and it's a tank that normally sits under your bed.
Ew.
The problem with that is the pump out stations are sometimes few and far between, and I think if you're based in a marina, that's probably a good option.
Yeah, but you do also sort of have the danger of you get to a pump out and it's not working.
Yes, and your tank's full.
Yeah, so you also have the cassette toilet, which was up until quite recently the preferred option.
Yes.
Where it's like a caravan, you fill up a cassette, you fill it with chemicals, when it's full you empty it, you change it, and then you have to empty that waste into a designated LSAM point, which are scattered along the canals. Again, my concern with that is that CRT services are slowly being shut down. There's quite a lot of services just are being shut, and so you have a longer sort of cruise time to actually get to a point where you can empty your LSAM.
And there are two other options. One is an incinerator toilet, but it's really expensive to run and it uses a lot of energy, and it costs, we believe, about 50 pence every time you press that button to so-called flush your toilet, but it does make everything down into a little ash can at the end of the few weeks, doesn't it? It makes everything into ash.
So, well, the Cinderella toilet, like Paul said, uses a lot of power, and you have these specialised bags at around about 50p per toilet visit, and it burns it down into a sort of egg cup of ash.
Yes.
If money was no object, that would be our preferred choice, to be fair, and power was no object.
Yeah.
However,
it's what they use on the shuttles, isn't it?
it is. It's incredible technology.
Yes.
But we were told you have to service them as well. The initial outlay is quite expensive. It's well beyond our budget to have one of them, to be honest.
Yeah. And your fourth and final option, which is the option that we've chosen, is a compost or separator toilet. You have a bucket that separates your solids and you have a bottle for separating your liquids. And it's quite easy to use, and for us as continuous cruisers, we think it's definitely the best option. There was a lot of grey area, wasn't there, around the Canal and River Trust saying they're not allowing you to dispose of your waste.
Yeah, that's not actually what the word... So people keep saying to us they banned you from disposing it. That isn't the wording they used. What they said was they discourage it, and it's very, very subtle difference.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean they banned it. But to be fair, out in the country, if it's in the middle of nowhere and it's like an embankment where you know nobody's going to be going that way, no animals are going to be going that way, you can actually dispose of it. It will compost down, as the name suggests.
Or dig a hole and bury it.
Yeah, so by separating your solids and liquids, you're not creating sewage, which is the thing that smells. And we were quite dubious, but there honestly is no smell from them. And it for us, it's totally the best solution, isn't it?
Yeah. I think going back to cassette toilets, for me, having to visit an LSAM point that sometimes isn't clean, doesn't smell clean, people have left it dirty, we don't have to do that at all, do we? And you've not said about disposing of the liquid, I guess, from a compost toilet?
That can be tipped in a hedgerow, as long as you're so far from a water source.
10 feet from a water source.
That can be disposed in a hedgerow. It's only the same as having a wild wee outside or animals weeing in the sort of fields and stuff. So
yeah. If you ever get talking about us, it's the number one subject that we all get talking about is what toilet have you got? So that's for the toilets. Next on the list, the question that we get asked the most, does it get cold in the winter? No, it doesn't get cold in the winter because we've got central heating and we've got a solid fuel fire. And there are a few options. A lot of people go for the Morso Squirrel, which is a solid fuel fire, so you can put logs and coal on it. And the option that we've got
a diesel reflex, and there are pros and cons for each. So for me, as an asthmatic, I love the idea of a real fire. We had one in the house,
yes,
but it was a big open space. on a boat, it definitely creates a lot of dust, and I can definitely feel my chest getting worse over winter when we have the fire lit. You've also got to store the coal and the logs, and in a limited space, it can sort of take up your whole well deck. It is romantic, and it definitely it's. But the problem is, it's not controllable. It is to a certain extent, but generally, it's either freezing, like when it dies down in the sort of early hours of the morning, or it's it's like Satan's armpit. And when you light it, it's boiling. You have the duck hatch open, all the windows open.
Middle of winter.
But it is dry heat, which is good. So it reduces condensation. It also, as Kev at Bickerstaff, when we had our first boat, suggested, it gives you a secondary source of heating. So if you solely rely on diesel for heating and your central heating, everything else in propulsion, and you run out and you're in the middle of nowhere, you've got no form of heating. So it does make sense, but from a health point of view, we went with the diesel reflex.
Yeah, so the diesel reflex is really easy to light. For us, we use a small lighter block. I know some people use
Methylated spirits.
I
burnt my arm using that, and it actually looked like a badly sunburnt. I had my watch on, you could see where the watch strap was. It's because I'm impatient, so rather than sort of leaving for the fumes to die down, I was like, oh, it'll be fine. Relit it, and it just went, it was like backdraft.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we go through, use the lighter block method.
Yeah, so the lighter block that we use is about the size of a sugar cube, and we light that and we turn it on, and it's instant heat. You know, it warms up your boat. You can leave it on low overnight. You get up in the morning and it's still lovely and warm, and you don't have to do a thing to your fire. So in winter we tend to run that for 10-14 days at a time when we get real cold spells. I guess you could argue that just have your central heating on, but I think you need that source of extra heat. Another option is a pellet stove, but we've no personal experience of that, but we know people who swear by it and say it's really good, so maybe that's something to look into. But to be honest, that's our answer to no, it doesn't get cold in the winter, but in the summer, for us, it does get too hot, because you've got a steel boat. It's basically a steel tube sitting in the sun all day. Most people want solar, so they won't moor under trees for the shade, and it does get very hot, and throughout the day the boat heats up more and more, and it can be unbearable, can't it?
Well, that's the trade-off, is that, you know, you when it gets sunny, you want the solar because you get free energy, but then the counter side is that the sun will warm your boat up. We're quite fortunate because our windows actually come out completely, so that's one option for us. Other people say have a light roof, which we did actually consider, and our boat builder at the time poo-pooed the idea, and we 100% knew it would be cooler with a sort of white roof or a lighter colour.
Yes. Anyway.
Some people hold the boat down like the roof, and that cools it down. So there are options out there, but yeah, it's something to consider during the summer.
Next on our list is you've not got constant supply of running water like you do in a house. And for me, I really got wound up by the fact that every 10 to 14 days you've got to get out your hose pipe, reel it down the towpath and plug in and fill your tank with water. But it just becomes part of your daily routine. And I guess the downside is, if you're continuously cruising and not in a marina, you've got to go and find a water point, and that could be miles away, or you've got to go to a winding hole, turn around, maybe go through some locks just to come and fill with water. But what we tend to do is when we're cruising, we never pass a water point. If we've got 3/4 of a tank of water, we'll still stop and we'll top up the water, because you never know, like what happened a couple of years ago. We were frozen in at Middlewich for 11 days, and luckily it's filled with water the day before.
Yeah, and we did see some boats who passed the water point, then were frozen in, and then we saw them lugging like water tanks up and down the towpath. The other option that we're actually thinking about for our new boat is what's called the water freedom system. So that's a company who've developed this system with numerous filters, a UV light that takes water from the canal. And I know that sounds disgusting, I was completely against it, but they've done vigorous tests and found that it's actually cleaner and safer than the water you get from the CRT water points. So we're actually seriously considering the water freedom system on our next boat. It just takes away that other element for continuous cruises.
Yeah, it means you can have a long hot shower if you want, and for us, we used to manage for about 2 weeks before we got Sebastian, who likes to swim in the river or a stream. And if he goes swimming and gets really muddy, we've got to bathe him, and then we've got to dry him, and then we're washing towels, so we're using a lot more water. And for us, that water freedom system should be a great solution, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and I know there'll be naysayers out there, and I am one of them. But actually, I think I'm converted. I'm going to speak to them at Crick because I want to do my own research.
Yeah.
But from what you've had a conversation, haven't you?
Yeah, with John.
Yeah, from speaking to John.
From Water Freedom.
It sounds incredible.
Yes, it does. The tests that they've done, they came back with the test results and said the results were sensational. It was some of the purest water it's seen, which is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing we're seriously considering.
Yeah, we're excited about that. Yeah. I think next on the list is noise.
So one of the biggest reasons for left bricks and mortar is because you can't control what your neighbours do. So be it a barking dog, screaming children, arguing, you can't control that. And so we took to Narrowboat live because we thought it'd be a quieter, more peaceful environment. However, on the canals you have different types of neighbours.
Yes. You can have 50 geese in a field opposite your boat kicking off because they're protecting the young ones.
I don't think they're kicking
the
off.
nest side.
That shows where like your background, Paul.
Oh, kicking off. Or you've got sheep, or you've got ducks pecking on your boat, and it's always 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. If you get a storm and it's really windy, the boat rocks and creaks, and it feels like you're on a ship in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, it's like being on the set of Cape Fear.
Yeah. And the rain on your roof.
I like that sound though.
Well, I was going to say some people find that really romantic, but for me, it just wakes me up and I get wound up.
Oh, I think you need to start chilling out more, Paul.
And you can get noisy neighbours. Not everyone is in this for the peace and quiet. Some people moor up and then play loud music or start doing work on the boat and hammering and banging away, doing repairs on the boat. So yeah, it's not always as quiet and peaceful as some people make out. Next on our list is...
family and friends and no fixed abode.
Yeah, so we know a lot of boaters, including ourselves, had this dreamy notion that when we bought a narrowboat, our friends would come and visit us and we'd go for days out and cruise on the lovely canals. But sometimes it's a lot of effort for your friends to jump in a car and drive 200 miles to come and see you. So we do miss our friends and neighbours, and we know a lot of boaters do miss friends and neighbours, especially friends and relatives, when they've not got a vehicle, because it's a one-way thing, isn't it? They can't go and visit their relatives and friends, but the friends can come to them if they make the effort.
Yeah.
And again, having no fixed postal address.
Yeah, so we actually found some like friends that we're really close to. We see maybe once a year now, which is really sad.
Yeah.
We've got other friends who really make that effort to try and see us like a few times a year, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
The postal address, currently we use my mum's address, the care of address.
That's for banking, because you can't bank without having a fixed postal address. So we just get our bank statements delivered to your mum.
And our driving licence,
Yeah.
And car insurance.
Yes.
So there are ways around it, but you know, eventually, and I know it's horrible to say, but we won't have that option.
No.
And then we're going to have to rethink our situation. Not being on a boat, just how we're going to deal with that.
Yeah.
There are services out there, such as, what's that called? Something Post, where you have a PO box and they deal with all your letters and stuff. I can't remember what it's called now.
And Amazon lockers as well. You can have stuff delivered to a local Amazon locker. But yeah, we're quite lucky because we use our parents' fixed address. But not having a fixed address, we can't vote unless...
You can register your interest in an area, but it's quite a convoluted process and most people just don't bother. Which is quite sad, because actually I believe everybody should vote. We've fought for the right to vote. But yeah, it is a bit of a faff really. GPs as well.
Yes.
Although you can register with a GP as a temporary patient and they shouldn't be able to turn you away. There's a NHS policy for people with no fixed abode where they have to treat you. And GPs, I think, forget that this exists and try and turn people away, but they absolutely shouldn't.
No.
You have the right to be treated on the NHS.
And I had a good example of this when I rang a local doctor in Wrenbury and explained that we were on a boat. And just for ease, I said we're on a holiday boat rather than living on a boat. They put me in as a temporary patient. I got seen within the hour. They gave me a note to take to the local hospital, and again I was seen at the hospital within a couple of hours. So that was just
probably better treatment than if you'd gone to your local GP.
Yeah, they just said no, you've got to come back tomorrow.
Yeah, but we know people that really struggle and they've been turned away, and it's appalling because that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, and as well as doctors, vets, For us, it was a worry when we had Dexter and he was about 12 or 13 when we moved on to a narrowboat. What do we do about our vets? Well, actually, you can contact your vet and ask them to email over all your vet's records. And then, as another example, we were up on the Peak Forest Canal. Dexter cut his paw open. The vet's was only a mile away, but he couldn't walk because his paw was badly cut. And a boater dropped us off at that vet's, which was fabulous, and they got the records from our current vet. So that's one way around it, isn't it?
Yeah, which is a real positive actually. It shows just how good the boating community is.
Yeah. Next on the list, but before we do give you this, if you live on a boat or you have a holiday boat, what are your bugbears and what do you find really difficult about being on a boat?
Yeah.
And if you're land-based, what do you think you would miss if you did live on a boat? Next on the list for us is, I'll try to put this, if you've got a land-based job like Anthony does, you've got to have a vehicle. And that's a real pain, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think we've shown how we cope with that situation with the bridge hopping. Luckily, I don't work full-time, so I only work 2 days a week. And the best solution for us was to get a camper van.
Yeah.
Because I sleep in that for 2 nights a week. I use the local gym to have a shower. But it is a bane trying to sort of piggyback the boat and the van.
Yeah.
So I cycle back sometimes like 11 miles like the other day.
Yeah.
And then only to find I was locked in. So it takes some planning. We've done it for 5 years and it's still working for us. But yeah, absolutely, I would love to be able to have a job where I could do from the boat.
So I do my art from the boat, which because I used to do magic shows, but I'd be driving all over the country and my props were kept at my parents' because you've got limited space on a boat. And I'm driving from Stratford upon Avon for about 2 hours, get to my parents, drive to my show, do my show, drop the props off, drive back to the boat. And that's why I've had to stop doing shows, because it took me about 7 hours to do one magic
I
show.
just thought it was because you're born idle.
Yeah. So I do my art. That's where it would be handy if you were in a marina, but that can be quite costly. So if you're in a marina, there's a car park, you don't have to worry about bridge hopping.
And quite often, like going back to the postal address, a lot of marinas allow you to send post there.
Yeah.
You can use that for your insurance for your car, your driving licence. Not all marinas, but a number of them do.
Next on our list is cost. It's not as cheap to live on a boat as some people think.
Yeah, I get a bit annoyed when I see these sensational headlines saying I gave up my house and mortgage free for £15,000. I've no idea what type of boat they bought for £15,000. And the running costs of the boat, day to day, if I'm going to be honest, are cheaper than running a house. However, the maintenance, the dragging the boat out every sort of 2 to 3 years for blacking.
Yeah, you've got to have your boat re-blacked. So when we say blacking, you have your boat lifted out of the water, you usually have it shot blast right down to the steel and then get it re-blacked, don't you?
Yeah, and if you have bitumen, that's like generally 2 to 3 years. If you have 2-pack epoxy, you could probably get away with 5 years. However, I would say I'd want to know what's going on underneath the waterline well before 5 years. I'll probably have it taken out.
Yeah. And like Anthony said, general maintenance, you've got to have your engine or generator serviced quite regularly. There are always jobs to do on a boat, and people say boat stands for bung on another thousand, because there's always things that happen when you're cruising. We got a tyre wrapped around our prop. We were quite lucky around our propeller. We were quite lucky, but we know another boater, same thing happened to them, and it bent the shaft and it had to have the boat lifted out of the water, and it was really costly, wasn't it? So when we lived on a narrowboat in the past, gas used to cost us about £10 a month. We generate our own electricity from the solar or by topping up the generator. But even on we run our generator to top up the batteries if we're not getting enough power from solar. And so even on an electric boat, we still have to top up with diesel, and that can be quite costly, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we use what's called red diesel, so they put a dye in it. It's only for industrial use, such as tractors, and narrowboats are included in that. So we get it at a cheaper rate than the supermarket pumps. However, it's still, can be quite costly. So day-to-day running, I totally think is cheaper than a house. Over the year, it probably still is a bit cheaper than a house, but not
loads cheaper.
Yeah, not the way these people, like these headlines that I keep seeing on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's totally giving a false impression of living, like the cost of living on our boat.
Yeah, so you've got your Canal and River Trust licence, which for us is about £1,200 a year. You've got your insurance, which for us is about £400 a year. If you're in a marina, that can be really costly, because if you're not living on your boat and you're in a marina, or you're living on your boat in a marina, which some marinas allow you to do, it can be anything from £200 a month to
£500 or £600.
£600 a month.
That's a mortgage, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, cost is something to consider as well.
Yeah. So next is having reliable internet. Now, there are numerous options for this. Prior to our recent change, we had a router, an omnidirectional aerial, and a SIM, like of your choice. Some network coverage is better than others. Some are better in certain areas. So we could have a really good network coverage in one area, move a few miles down the canal, and have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Now, as vloggers, that wouldn't work for us. It was quite a bit of a bind and a disadvantage. So we reluctantly moved over to Starlink, which again is really costly.
Yeah.
But we need that reliable internet. So you weigh the pros and cons, like the cost versus benefit.
Yeah.
And for us, the cost is, the benefit outweighs the cost.
Yeah. We're coming up to a lock, so we'll carry on after we've done this lock.
Yeah.
See you in a second.
See you in a bit. Oh yeah, I mean, we'll hold and try and get hold of
Next on our list, believe it or not everyone on the canal is friendly, are they?
No, we've had a few incidences where we've put on the vlogs. We've had one guy who was so close to our stern, we thought he was going to steer the boat, swearing and getting us to pull over. He was going past moored boats. That was quite intimidating, to be honest.
Yeah. And it spoiled our day and our journey, and it was our first experience of the Llangollen Canal, and it did sort of spoil it a little bit.
It tainted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It absolutely did.
Yeah. So there are some grumpy boaters out there. 99% are friendly, but you do get that 1% who don't want to help you. They don't want to speak to you. They don't want to say hello, and yeah, they just want to keep themselves to themselves.
Which I don't mind people keeping themselves to themselves. He wasn't keeping himself to himself, was he? Because he was like trying to impact on our cruising.
Yes. And finally, we have got a couple of bonus points, but the final one for us is closures and stoppages.
I think this is quite pertinent to all people on the canal, whether you're leisure boaters, hire boaters, or liverboards. Closures and stoppages are always going to affect your plans. This year alone, we've had about 3 sort of definite plans change because of closures and stoppages.
Yeah, we were going to do the Peak Forest Canal, but to do that we had to go on the Macclesfield Canal, and there's a breach, and that's where the canal bank collapses and they lose water, and it can take 6 months to fix that, sometimes even longer. The Bridgewater breach is enormous, and people are saying it could take a year at least to fix that.
Well, they're still wrangling on who's to blame, so and it definitely things like that. Totally unplanned, so you have to have a tentative plan when you, certainly as liverboards, of where you're going to go, and then you have to be prepared to change them, because
that's what I was going to say. Because at the moment, we're on the Calden Canal. We'd planned to stay on here for a few weeks. Now we can't, because there's a water shortage and they're closing it next weekend, but we're away, so we've only had 2 days to do this section.
Well, they're not closing the Calden Canal, they're only closing the Frogall branch.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, if there's a water shortage here, it's probably going to affect the Leap branch eventually. But at the moment, our plan is to get off here by Monday onto the Leap branch, and then we'll get Crick out of the way, and then we'll probably have to get off the Leap branch as well and totally off the Calden. But we'll keep an eye on them. We've signed up to CRT closures and stoppages for this section, so we know what we're going to what's happening really.
Yeah, so you've got to be very flexible with your plans, and sometimes you can be stuck somewhere. If you want to get back to home mooring and you've paid for it, it's annoying when you can't get back to your home mooring.
Playing devil's advocate though, the canal is over a 200-year-old living museum with a lot of over 2,000 miles of canal network to maintain,
and all those locks.
And it's a thankless job, and it costs money, and as you're aware, there's been a cut in the CRT revenue, and so they're trying to find alternative streams of income. including donations by becoming friends of the Canal and River Trust. So there are ways you can help, but you know, it is a thankless job, and I know CRT got a lot of bad press. Some of it you could argue is justifiable, but it is, you know, it's a really thankless job.
Anyway, we're waffling. We're coming up to another lock, and after this, we will give you our 2 bonus points and reasons for not living on a narrowboat.
What a schoolboy error! That isn't a lock.
It's not a lock.
That's a lift bridge.
Very narrow lift bridge. Which brings us on to our last 2 points. One of them being no garden. When we had Dexter, our old dog, we could just let him out in the garden in the summer, and he could come and go as he pleased, and go into the house, go out in the garden. We could relax in the knowledge that he was safe. On a canal or a river, it's quite difficult because there are cyclists about, there are random people walking about with dogs. You've not got that same privacy, have you? So I think I'd miss a garden for that. I don't miss the work of a garden, but I do miss that private space.
Yeah, I do think it's more sort of, you know, hits home more with people who have pets, because I mean, some people may just miss the garden in general, but it's like, for the reasons Paul said, there was an instance where Dexter actually got hit by one of these electric scooters, and then became really nervous at anything moving at the side of him. Obviously you would never get that in your own garden.
Living in a house, you can't sink it. So there is that danger of when you're living on a narrowboat. We know a couple of people that have sunk their boats in a lock, and it must be devastating to lose your home and all your belongings in seconds, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and while, you know, you're supposed to be insured when you have a boat, it takes time for that to be worked out, and what do you do in the meantime? This is our only residence, so if we did sink this, we'd have nowhere to go.
Yeah, we know one couple whose boat had sank up on the Leeds Liverpool Canal. The boat was only a few months old, and people were saying, well, surely they got insurance. But think about it, all they've got are the clothes they were stood in. They didn't have the bank cards, they didn't have any spare clothes. So yeah, I mean, they could stay in a hotel, but...
Yeah, there was a GoFundMe page for another unfortunate guy who had a fire on his boat.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that were... his insurance will pay for that. And I was like, but he needed funds for the immediate time. And when we donated to that, because it totally hit home for us.
Yeah.
And, you know, it could happen to any one of us on a boat.
Yeah. Yeah, he needed somewhere to live, basically, didn't he?
Yeah.
Until his insurance paid out. And lastly, it's very physically demanding living on a narrowboat.
Not for you, it's not.
Of course it is.
I do most of the locks now.
Even being at the tiller is physically demanding when you're cruising for hours at a time. But operating the locks, jumping off your boat, swing bridges, lift bridges, lifting bags of coal if you've got a solid fuel fire, it's very physically demanding work.
Yeah, and it is a worry as you get older. I mean, having said that, we know people in their 80s who are still narrowboating and still doing the locks. But there is this physical demand, as Paul has said, and it is a worry. I don't want to come off the canals. I can't imagine ever coming off the canals. We may consider a linear more in the future when we're unable to do this.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people would argue it's a depreciating asset. If you buy a boat, it's not like a house that should appreciate in value. But for us, we just want that sense of adventure, and it's not about a financial gain. We realise when you get to a certain point in your life what's important, and so what if our boat loses value over time? We've enjoyed living on it.
Yeah, you certainly can't take it with you, and you know, if we both go out of this world and there's not a penny left, then we've done a good job as far as I'm concerned.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed our points and reasons for not living on a narrowboat. If you've got your own particular reasons...
Insects.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you've got your own particular reasons, get in touch and let us know what you don't like about living on a narrowboat, or if you live in a house, what you would miss about living in a house. One thing we've not touched on is the space.
Do you know what though? For me, it's never felt cramped. And I know people say, oh, I don't know how you live in that space. It's never once felt cramped. So yeah, there will be people who find that space quite restrictive.
Yeah, I think if we're tired, especially if we're feeling cranky and you're both getting in each other's way because one wants to be in the galley and someone else wants to be in the galley, and you've got to figure out this way of getting on together.
It's an everyday occurrence for me, so I've just got a coping mechanism.
But yeah, we hope you've enjoyed this video, and watch out for our next video, which will be our top 10 reasons why you should live on a narrowboat. But if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It's completely free.
Yep, keep your comments coming. We do love to receive them. It's really interesting to see what people have to say.
Okay, take care. Thanks for watching.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.